Hello, everyone. So there's a lot of news to talk about. Obviously, the James Comey testimony happened. Before I get to that, I'm actually going to get to that a little bit later in the segment. I wanted to start with a new report that came out just recently from The Intercept, and it had to do with the Russian hacking debacle, whatever. Um, Russians attempted to hack at least one voting vendor software, related company. Wow. First time a real claim like this has been made that the Russians actually attacked something related to the voting machines. That had never been discussed, prior to this. It was always the Russians got the emails and then gave them to WikiLeaks to run. So pretty big development, and it's hard to really tell if you're going to trust this or not. It comes from the NSA, and our intelligence agencies are not always the most reliable and trustworthy. I mean, people speculate whether this is a plant, a fake, to kind of like keep this narrative going. I don't know whether to believe that or not. It certainly is interesting that this is an actual document that came from the NSA apparently, and it is merely an analysis. There's no raw intelligence being offered, and that's always kind of the case with these guys. There's no actual indication, even they admit in the report that the Russians actually influenced the election in this way, specifically. It's a lot of low tech stuff. Like the Russians like send these spear phishing emails, like the little link that you shouldn't click on when you get a weird email, and then their computers get hacked. Well, regardless, it seems to be true until proven, I guess, proven otherwise that this happened. So the leaker that did it was Reality Lee Winner. Interesting name. She was arrested. She's only 25 years old. And she's going to be charged with espionage. And this is the same deal going back to Edward Snowden. I mean, like, Obama set this precedent where if you leak classified information, basically, then you're going to be charged with this obscure law, like that dates back to World War One, about spies, and they do it conveniently so that basically you can't make the argument in court that you're doing this for the public good. There's no defense for that in this legislation that they're basically suing you off. So, I mean, it's certainly a bad precedent because for a democracy to function, you need transparency in government. So, when you have this warrant information, and yeah, I know it's classified information. I understand that she broke the law, and that's kind of the way it is. But policing this stuff in this way, in this very authoritarian way, and this includes Obama. I'm not just blaming Trump for this. Obama would be guilty of this as well. I mean, he cracked down on whistleblowers as much as anyone, if not more. So it's important to understand the implications on free speech that this has. Um, because any attempt to disprove the narrative is viewed as un-American. And Obama, to his credit, I guess, he didn't go after WikiLeaks specifically because it's kind of a screwed up reason why he didn't do it. But they argued that all the mainstream outlets were reporting on WikiLeaks the same information basically. So they said, okay, well, if we're gonna go after WikiLeaks for doing this, then these mainstream outlets are also, propagating the same information out there. It's literally just reporting on it. So it puts us in kind of a blind spot, if you know what I mean. Like what is the line, and how much are we going to crack down on these people? So they argued, yeah, it was not worth the risk. But now, Trump is, pretty dead set on getting Julian Assange. And Jeff Sessions has said this, I believe, as well. I mean, people want us to basically kidnap him. The Wall Street Journal essentially said, yeah, you don't need a warrant, you don't need nothing to get him, just kidnap him, basically. Like Black Ops style or something. Yeah. So basically, intervention is a big problem, right? Or I'm not supposed to say that because America's so great. I don't know what the hell the problem is. I should say. So there's yet to be real sufficient evidence of Russia having any effect on the election at all. We don't know if they gave those emails to WikiLeaks. We don't know that. We don't know this new report about them hacking the software vendor. We don't know if that had any real effect on the election. Just kind of interesting to point out, I guess. But I think something that you have to take note of is Trump just wants to dismiss the whole thing offhand. He's acting definitely afraid of it. Like, there's kind of no... I don't see how else you could take it any other way. Like, he's very dismissive of these claims, doesn't want to talk about them, and now basically contradicting what James Comey has said. I mean, Trump kind of had his narrative, then Comey testified and he gave his side, so Comey really came second. But regardless, we knew these kind of things were happening. We had an idea. Comey basically only gave us the details, like the extra minute details. So anyways, the firing of James Comey is a very big deal because you're ultimately going after someone who's investigating you. And my opinion on it is, if Trump really didn't fire Comey because of the Russia investigation, the fact of the matter is he is really stalling that whole process by doing what he did. So, I mean, whether it's intentional or not, it is pretty important, I guess you could say, because from a legal standpoint, the actual obstruction of justice part has to be his motivation about the Russian investigation. But the fact is, it's getting bogged down. So, just like, where is the accountability? I don't know at this point. I mean, yeah, Trump would like you to think he's the victim in all this, and that like he's being maligned with all this, and like he never offers any alternative. Of course, he just is deny. And somehow we're supposed to believe him. I mean, I don't know how people fall for what he says and does, but that's not my problem. Not my chair, not my problem. Excuse me. Some people will know what that reference is. He could be so much more transparent about what he's doing by simply. He doesn't want to lie. Obviously, that must be the case. He doesn't want to like contradict people so much that he's just making shit up. But then that's the point. He's lying then, unless he says something different. But it's always just deny reality, like I say. He could release his tax returns, and he won't, because so many controversial things have just been coming out about him and his businesses and investments. Even now, before he's released them, like just recently we found out money that was supposed to be donated to kids with cancer was funneled into one of his businesses. So we're seeing things like this, even with the little window into his finances we have now. It's not looking good for him. I mean, look, I kind of am accepting that Trump is probably going to be in office still for some time. I mean, he's not going to be impeached with this Congress. That's probably just not going to happen. Short of, I don't know, like such incriminating evidence against Trump that you couldn't deny it whatsoever. Whatever that would be. But yeah, it's not going to happen this year, maybe not next year. And whether or not he's going to resign and the pressure's too much for him, I don't know. It seems a little bit uncertain. So where was I? Mm, yeah, pay to play corruption, big one. Saudi lobbyists who opposed legislation that would allow the families of 9/11 victims to sue the Saudi government paid Trump Hotel $270,000. Now, just for context, Obama originally vetoed this legislation that I believe it was overridden in Congress. So Trump is in a position basically to defend his donors, and that, if you've been paying attention, that's most likely what he'll be doing. He just approved a weapons deal to Saudi Arabia, recently, and did his little trip there, like touching the magic ball or whatever the hell that was. So money in politics is the key thing here. I mean, follow the money and you'll see where the real corruption is. And with Russia, look, you can find some interesting examples, I guess. But again, what has actually affected policy with Russia in regards to the U.S.? Nothing really. In fact, Trump, as I've said before, is going in the opposite direction by escalating in Syria, denying Exxon their waiver to do the oil deal. So I don't know exactly what people are talking about, like Trump is this puppet. It's not really, there just aren't really examples. You could see certain connections between people, but what is that yielding? Like any kind of even shady business deal going on, you could see it a little bit, like with kind of in a similar vein to this, the Russian state bank that benefited from Trump Hotel, their dealings there. But again, that hasn't affected policy yet in any way. There's no reason for it to. This is a specific lobbying firm for specific legislation that was about 9/11 families. So keep that in mind. And when we talk about things like the establishment in politics and corruption, like that is not necessarily a bad word. It depends what you're talking about, I think. Most of the time, yeah, I would probably say it's pretty bad. I mean, our political climate is really bad right now. But, right now, the establishment is largely Obama's legacy. And, I'm definitely not someone who doesn't criticize Obama. Like, I have a lot of problems with what he did in some regards. But he's done a lot of good things, too. And so what Trump is doing is essentially just taking away all the good things that he did. And this is what happened recently now. The House Republicans voted to, gut Dodd-Frank. And it was attacking the Consumer Protection Bureau. So it's going to basically advance further now as a bill and go to the Senate. I don't know if they're going to tweak it at all, but this is apparently where we're at now. We're attacking government agencies that offer restitution for people who are defrauded by big banks, corporations. This was something that came out of the Great Recession. When Obama took office, this was created to give restitution to people who were affected by the Great Recession. So Trump would like to have you think he's for, the everyman, and he's looking out for you, but at the same time he's doing actual policies. He's going to sign it. Look, if you don't think he's not going to sign that, if you think he's going to buck Paul Ryan, no. Paul Ryan is so happy that Donald Trump is president right now. He has said in speeches that, we just needed that guy up there to be signing away. I mean, he has no real ideology, Trump. I mean, he's been all over the map. Paul Ryan is a little bit more, you can kind of track where he's going. especially when you follow the money again. But look, Trump is not going to fight the Republicans. He's passed like very little legislation as it is, so he's not going to turn anything down. Believe me. Let me tell you. So why will the Democrats only ever fight Trump on Russia? Why is this always their line of attack? Excuse me. Because people seem to be very interested in it. The media gets their eyeballs on the screen, right? And they'll score political points for being on the right side of the issue. No pun intended. But look, if you're going to play dirty politics like this, you have to understand that this is not some excuse to just keep the same shitty neoliberal policies, okay? This is the problem. You're not standing for anything. You're simply not admitting where you went wrong, where you lost, a big portion of the country in this election. I mean, I understand that Hillary won the popular vote, but the states that were supposed to go for her that didn't, 4 out of 5 in the Rust Belt, this is a big loss. And look at all the seats in Congress and the governorship, excuse me. This is a terrible loss for the Democrats, except they want you to think that it's going to be basically a cakewalk for them in the midterms. Look, I think the Republicans are doing really poorly. They're very unpopular, but I don't think the Democrats should be taking this for granted. This is exactly why they lost the election. So all I'm saying is don't make the same mistake twice. It should be very simple to understand. But you have people like Maxine Waters, Dianne Feinstein, Elizabeth Warren. And look, I respect Elizabeth Warren actually kind of a good amount. She's said a lot of things I don't agree with, which I'll get to. But she does have a very good progressive record. Even Maxine Waters to some degree has a pretty good progressive record. But they're going crazy over this Russia thing. And it's pretty disingenuous, honestly. Like, not to say that there's no substance with this whole Russia thing. I am pretty sympathetic to that, and I think that you have to have transparency. You can't have Trump trying to obfuscate all the time on this thing. But they don't talk about anything else, and that's a problem, okay? Their voting record, yes, you can point to pretty bad things. Maxine Waters voted yes on letting shareholders vote on executive compensation. You have rich people basically deciding how great their bonuses are. Amazing. Dianne Feinstein, practically like Hillary Clinton, except maybe even worse. I don't know. She voted for the Iraq War, just a war hawk through and through, and refuses to endorse Medicare for all because it's a government takeover of healthcare. Which, if you actually study the issue, we're talking about paying through your tax dollars for healthcare, right? But that doesn't mean private industry necessarily goes away. You can buy private insurance, or if anything, they're the ones basically administering the care, the doctors and all these things. Like, you can have like a mix, and it shows ignorance on this issue that she wants to frame it in that way. Or it's probably just, honestly disingenuous, and she knows what she's talking about and just doesn't want to support it because of her campaign donations. They all just hinge on this investigation and trying to get political points, and people get to know about them. And look, that's part of how they get reelected, right? They're seen in the press, and people make their opinion of them. A lot of people, as I say, are very riled up on this Russia issue. So it is kind of effective, to be honest. It is a way to gain support from people that may not necessarily be engaged in politics, but I don't think it's a very tenable strategy. It's not going to be sustainable, because ultimately, what are you going to be doing in the 2018 midterms, in the 2020 election, what are you going to stand for? What are you going to tell people is going to be the alternative to Trump? It's an important question that I don't think they have much of an answer to. So with Elizabeth Warren now, she states pretty bluntly, she did this TYT interview where she's just not going to go after Democrats. Like, they can basically be Joe Manchin, who's a Republican, and has like terrible views, like with climate, just wants to leave the Paris Agreement, which we did, and I'll get to later. Ridiculous views on the war on drugs. He said in an interview, like what should we do to stop crime or whatever. It's like, I think we should start a war on drugs. That's what he said. like we haven't been doing that for however many years. So he can be all that, basically Republican light, but he doesn't want to cut Social Security. Oh, good for you. Good for you. So basically, you have a D in front of your name. Elizabeth Warren will defend you, even if you have deplorable ideas. And yes, there are such things like being pro-life, where you just want to legalize abortion. Make it incredibly hard for women to get abortions if they need them. You're being ignorant, and you have to be called out for that. You don't get a pass just because you're a Democrat. I'm sorry. So, just the last thing on that. When you look at the facts, if you want to reduce the number of abortions, then you have to have a pro-choice outlook, honestly, because making it so that you have to go to the black market, basically, and do this in an illegal fashion, this is a big problem. And by not letting women do it in a way that is legal and safe to do, it is bad policy. And the number of teen pregnancies goes down. So I just don't understand. The Republicans just have such hypocrisy on this issue, to say the least. So they say you couldn't run real progressives in these rural parts of the country. But they don't explain for Bernie going to these town halls and in places like West Virginia, where they largely went for Trump, and they cheer on his agenda and his ideas. So it just flies in the face of what the Democrats would have you believe. And they have to be called out on it. Otherwise, they keep going down this path of just blind obfuscation. Look, I think that the Democrats doing a Tea Party-like strategy and type of opposition is actually kind of a good thing. But look, you can't be doing it in this willy-nilly fashion where you're not actually addressing ideas. You're not really standing for things that are great. I mean, look, the Democrats just backed sanctions on Iran when they didn't do anything, wrong. They abided by the Iran deal this whole time, and we were the ones that screwed them over in that. Like, we basically went against it first. So it's not a good foreign policy to be this hawkish and interventionist. I just believe that because we make ourselves less safe, and I don't think we're that in danger of being attacked, or even in some kind of World War III type situation with Russia. It's probably not entirely likely at this point, at least. But you have to understand that we're doing more harm than good. Okay, so you have to change something, and I think that we have done too much intervention. It's just you can't possibly say that we haven't been doing enough. I don't think we're involved in 7 different countries. We're waging this shadow war in Africa that no one even talks about. It's just, when is the line? When is too much for these people? I don't know. So let's get to the James Comey testimony, the big talked about moment. Ooh. Everyone was looking at this. I was looking at an article in BuzzFeed. Um, Everyone's like in work and school all over. They're watching this like it's like practically the second coming of Christ. I don't know, but kind of much ado about nothing. I mean, he largely reiterated what we already know. He's just on record and under oath contradicting the president's story on a lot of these things. Um, we know now Trump and his supporters, they've tried to defame Comey with these ads paid through PACs, super PACs. Um, and Trump was lying apparently about Comey lowering the morale among his staff at the FBI. I mean, yeah, there's no proof of that being the case. That his staff was, I don't know, down and about with Comey there, and that things weren't going great. There's no proof of that. We don't know, but seems to me like I wouldn't believe Trump. He's just a liar on so many things. So while it may be true, as I believe, that Comey was acting very politically at times, you have to understand from Trump's perspective, he was basically okay with all of this until he found out he was being investigated with this Russia thing. He praised Comey sending the letter to Congress. He claimed it brought back the integrity of the FBI. Excuse me. According to Comey, Trump told him he was doing a great job. So Trump is, he's back to the FBI was horrible under Comey, and he can just change his opinion whenever he wants, and people are gonna follow him no matter what. Basically, I mean that's the beauty of Trump, isn't it? He's just this amorphous thing who can be whoever he wants to be. He's running basically on his charisma because he's not a politician. He's this reality star buffoon, so he can be whoever he wants. Basically, it doesn't matter. Truly fascinating. But this hypocrisy, like, I just don't know how sustainable it can really be. I mean, how much is too much for these people to admit that he's a liar? He's went back on so many of his promises, and he's not getting anything done. In fact, like, there's more gridlock than ever. He's like said he's going to be this big unifier. Of course, that was a stupid thing for him to say. That was not going to happen. And look, yeah, the hypocrisy. You find it in areas that are very surprising, actually, like with climate change. So Trump has, officially took the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. And this was this agreement about climate change that everyone regarded as very important. I don't think it went far enough, but whatever. If you want to be a leader in this climate change issue, of course, yeah, you should want to be a part of it. So it was kind of a bad thing that he did this, left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. But you look at Trump's record, actually, he signed this letter in 2009. Him and some of his family members actually signed a letter that the U.S. should be a leader on the issue of climate change, and they're actually they were addressing this to Obama and Congress at the time. So explain that to me. I mean, he's saying we have to lead in the issue of climate change, and then now he's backed out of the Paris Agreement. You never know how to read Trump, and these things just don't add up. I mean, he's probably just like many other politicians. He's bought for and paid for by the donors and the wealthy class. We just see him obsessed with oil all over the country. He's if you look Trump and oil up on Google, you'll see all these articles about him trying to cut deals, build pipelines, all these things. It's not going to be good for our world, honestly. I mean, like, we're just at the tipping point now, and if we go any further, look, we've already done so much damage as it is. If we go any further, it's not going to look great at all. It's really just going to be in an apocalyptic type situation. And people, will laugh at you sometimes if they don't believe that, but look at the evidence. Look at what the scientists say. And it should be that simple, but apparently not. The oil and gas industries, they get far and away more subsidies than the renewables do. And that's a big fact to point out because, this oil and gas industry that I speak of is incredibly wealthy and they make record profits, but yet the renewables, they can't compete with all that subsidy money. It's such a big discrepancy, and we just give them extra money even despite the profits, is what I'm saying. So something's wrong with that. I mean, like, the government should be making decisions that will benefit the people by giving massive amounts of taxpayer dollars to already wealthy corporations. I would argue that is not the best interests of the American people, especially when we should be going in a renewable direction and not screw over our future generations. So Trump is a faux populist because he just, like, how is he really bucking the establishment? One example would just be TPP, because that's kind of like only the really wealthy people were for that. But look, the neocons run Trump's foreign policy. Goldman Sachs runs his economic policy. And it just contradicts his entire persona that he put on during the campaign, that he was anti-establishment. He's going to go after the bankers and people in Wall Street. It's completely antithetical to each other. So people don't want to admit that they've been bamboozled. They only focus on what they perceive as good that Trump did, and that's mostly the more xenophobic, bigoted things. His harsh stance on immigration. And, I mean, look, Obama had a pretty bad record with immigration. He had, more deportations than Bush even. But we're seeing, ridiculous stories come out about just average families that get deported, and it tears families apart. His stance on refugees is far too hardline. It's not in the traditional American sense to ban people based by religion. Look, and that's the truth. He didn't just choose those countries randomly, and in fact, he kind of did in a way, because there's really not much sense to the list that he gives out. But the majority Muslim. The first version of it had special treatment for Christians and other minorities. So we all know what the intent was. It was to single out Muslims and brown people and just say, you look like a terrorist, so that's bad enough. That was the whole point. And we know that because Rudy Giuliani said on Fox News, I believe it was, that Trump called him up and was like, hey, how can I make a Muslim ban legal? And so he explained it to him, and we don't know exactly what he said, but we have the bans to look at now to see, the inner workings, I guess, of that. It's this law and order model of being president. This is a Richard Nixon thing that he did, and the Southern strategy. It appealed to racism in the South. And I think, you can't ignore that was a big factor with Trump's popularity. The silent majority is a term that refers to essentially these kind of people that are in the South, that are largely, racist and have more traditional conservative values. And I think a lot of people would probably like to believe that that's not a thing, and that's not what our country is. But the truth is there's a lot of those people. So even though you have these cities that are very liberal, like Los Angeles and New York, the entire layout of the country, when you look at it, they have a lot of conservative views, and it had a lot of swing in this election. And you have to come to terms with that, and dealing with that in terms of policy is hard. I'll admit that. I mean, what do the Democrats do? They should be running someone like Bernie Sanders and recognize the wave that's happening with him, because he's gaining so much popularity, even with Trump supporters, as I've said. But they don't want to do this. They want to go after Trump with this whole Russia thing, which, as I've said time and time again, you might be right on this whole thing. You might be able to prove Trump guilty of something or another with this Russia thing, or get him to resign because of the pressure. But what are the Democrats going to offer up? That question is going to come up no matter what happens with the investigation. So it's going to be to the betterment of the Democrats to answer that question as soon as they can.